There are 60 years of Bose speakers, and every single one of them exists because an MIT professor decided the specs were lying. He wasn't an acoustics expert. He was an electrical engineer whose doctorate was on nonlinear systems. But he heard something no spec sheet could explain, and he spent 50 years building an empire on it, before giving the whole thing away. Every model, in order. From the first one in 1966 to the ones sitting on shelves right now. Get it wrong, and you've built the most mocked product in home audio. Get it right, and you sell that same product for 25 years. Everyone assumes better numbers mean better sound. Amar Bose bet his company that the opposite was true. In 1956, Amar Bose was finishing his doctorate at MIT. His thesis was called A Theory of Nonlinear Systems. Not acoustics, not sound. So he bought himself a reward. He walked into a Radio Shack, one of only 2 in the entire country, and picked out a hi-fi system the way an engineer picks anything. He read the specifications, and he took the best ones on the shelf. Then he put on a violin record. His reaction, "This doesn't sound anything like real music." That wasn't a vague impression. Bose had played violin since he was a child. He knew what one sounds like in a room. He later put it plainly. The presentation of the product said it was good, and his ears said it was bad. Almost anyone else returns the speakers. But Bose had run a radio repair business as a kid, after his father's import company collapsed during the war. He didn't hear a bad product. He heard a bad idea. Here's the idea. A speaker gets measured in a lab. One speaker, one microphone, pointed straight at each other. Therefore, the specifications describe sound arriving in a straight line. And you have never once heard live music that way. In a concert hall, sound leaves the stage and hits the ceiling, the side walls, the floor. It reaches your ear from every direction, milliseconds apart, and your brain assembles all of it into one thing, the feeling of being there. Bose spent years on this. By 1959, his psychoacoustics work was a recognized research project at MIT, and he reached the conclusion every profile of him repeats. In a concert hall, roughly 80% of what you hear never reaches you directly. It bounces first, 80%, and the entire industry was designing for the other 20. Therefore, the speaker sitting on his floor wasn't broken. The specification was. It took him 8 more years to act on it. In 1964, he founded his company in Massachusetts with $10,000, and it wasn't his money. It came from Y.W. Lee, his own thesis advisor at MIT, who put in his life savings. Bose eventually bought that stake back for $260,000. The company never went public, not once in 60 years. Today, it moves an estimated $3.2 billion a year. But a theory isn't a product. To sell reflected sound, Bose had to build a box that aimed most of its speakers away from the person listening. 4 years after founding the company, he did exactly that. 9 drivers, 8 of them pointed at the wall. Critics called it a joke. It stayed in production for 25 years. 4 years after founding the company, Amar Bose puts the speaker that will define everything on sale. He calls it the 901. From the outside, it's an unremarkable box. Inside, it's a provocation. 9 drivers per cabinet, all identical, all 4.5 inches. One faces you, the other 8 face backward, into a rear panel folded into a V, aimed at your living room wall. The number Bose prints in his own specifications is this: 11% direct sound, 89% reflected. Look at what he just did. He had a thesis. In a concert hall, around 80% of what you hear bounces before it reaches you. Here he doesn't approximate it. He pins it to a hard number and builds a product that reproduces it inside your house. And there's a second heresy in that box. A normal speaker splits the work. A big woofer for the lows, a small tweeter for the highs, and a crossover deciding which frequency goes where. The 901 has none of that. 9 identical cones, no crossover. The entire spectrum comes out of the same drivers. Therefore, there's no mismatch between lows and highs, because there aren't 2 different parts to splice together. But a 4.5-inch cone can't move air like a woofer, or sparkle like a tweeter. And here comes the part every 901 owner knows by heart. The cabinet doesn't work alone. It ships with an active equalizer that goes between your amplifier and your speakers, pushing the bass by as much as 18 decibels. Hook up a 901 without that equalizer, and you'll hear mid-range, mid-range, and more mid-range. That's where the joke came from. The one that followed the brand for decades. Bose. No highs, no lows. A punchline about the best-selling speaker in hi-fi history. Because that's what it was. $499 a pair in 1968. About $4,400 today. More than 1 million Americans bought one. And it stayed in the catalog until 2016. 48 years on the market, 6 series, from the Series 1 with no logo on the front to the Series VIX with its 14-element acoustic matrix. The press split in half. Julian Hirsch, at Stereo Review, published a favorable review in 1968 that sent sales climbing. 2 years later, Consumer Reports did the opposite. It described instruments swelling to impossible sizes, a violin 10 feet wide, a piano stretching wall to wall, and told readers not to buy without listening first. The critics had a real argument. The 901 depended on your room. The manual asked for the point of the V 16 inches from the back wall, never closer than 8, and 2 to 4 feet from the side walls. Follow that and you got an enveloping sensation no rival could match. Ignore it and the bass went loose and the instruments wandered. Therefore, the 901 wasn't a speaker you bought. It was a speaker you negotiated with, and that demand, the price, the size, the mandatory wall, was the product's ceiling. Bose had proven his thesis, but he'd proven it in an expensive, fussy object that didn't fit in a normal home. It would also cost him a lawsuit that reached the Supreme Court. We'll come back to that. First, there's something earlier. Because the 901 wasn't the first speaker Bose ever sold. It was the second. The first one sold for a single year, and almost nobody alive has seen one. 2 years before the 901, in 1966, Bose put his first consumer product on sale. It was called the 2201, and the name is literal. 22 transducers in a single cabinet. 22 small cones, all identical, spread across a curved surface. The cabinet was an eighth of a sphere, and it only made sense in one place, wedged into the corner of your room. The logic was elegant. An eighth of a sphere, plus 2 walls and a floor reflecting around it, completes a full sphere. Therefore, to your ear, the sound stopped coming from a piece of furniture and seemed to be born from a point floating in the middle of the room. On paper, the perfect radiator. In practice, it demanded 2 empty corners. Yours aren't. Almost nobody's are. Fewer than 60 units were built, all by hand. It was on sale for exactly 1 year, 1966. And it didn't even solve the thing that started all of this. Violins of all instruments still didn't sound natural. There's one in the MIT Museum today. Bose took a line out of that failure that explains the rest of his career. They didn't really know what they were looking for, but he learned to pay attention to surprises. Therefore, the 901 wasn't an improvement on the 2201. It was the correction of its one fundamental error. The 2201 needed a specific geometry. The 901 only needed a wall, and with a wall, you could sell it to anyone. The 901 proved the thesis, but it cost $500. It was heavy, it demanded a wall 16 inches away, and it came with an extra box you had to plug in. None of that fits in an average house. Therefore, in 1975, Bose launched the 301, and to do it, he had to betray himself. Remember the argument behind the 901? 9 identical cones, no filter, because splitting lows from highs muddies the sound. The 301 does the exact opposite. An 8-inch woofer for the lows, a separate tweeter for the highs. The crossover Bose had dodged, now sitting inside the cabinet. What it keeps is the idea that matters. The tweeter doesn't aim at you, it fires up and to the side, so part of the sound reaches you bounced, directs reflecting in a box that fits on a shelf, and the equalizer disappears. You hook it to your amplifier and you're done. Therefore, the 301 stopped being a device for enthusiasts and became a speaker anyone could buy without reading a manual. It sold from 1975 well into the 80s, ran through 5 series, and it's routinely cited today as one of the best-selling speakers of all time. Around it, Bose built a full ladder. Upward, the 601, a floor-standing system, 6 drivers, 2 8-inch woofers and 4 3-inch, arranged asymmetrically, with a switch to reconfigure the radiation pattern if your room had no sidewalls nearby. The promise was explicit. 901 sound for a lot less money. In between, the 501 and the 701 filled out the high end. Downward in 1982, the 201, a 6.5-inch woofer, smaller even than the 301, for rooms where nothing else fits. It ran 6 series, 5 numbers, 1 principal, each for a different living room. But while Bose was filling America's homes, he still had a problem open since 1970. A magazine had written that his speakers made a violin sound 10 feet wide. Bose took them to court, and he didn't stop until the Supreme Court. The published sentence said instruments tended to wander about the room. What the author had actually heard, as the trial established, was sound wandering along the wall between the speakers. That's the whole difference. And on that difference, Bose built 13 years of litigation. He sued in February 1971. in federal court in Massachusetts. In 1974, he won. The judge concluded the statement was false and had been published with actual malice. In 1982, the appeals court reversed it. Therefore, the case went to the only place left. April 30th, 1984. Bose Corporation v. Consumers Union. 6 votes to 3. Opinion written by Justice John Paul Stevens. Bose lost. The court left behind a line that's been cited more than 2,000 times since. There is a significant difference between proving something is false and proving it was published with malice. Appeals courts would have to independently review whether actual malice existed, rather than simply accepting the trial judge's finding. A speaker company fought 13 years over 4 words, lost, and rewrote American defamation law on the way out. But while the case climbed from court to court, Bose was already working in another room, one that moves at 60 miles an hour. A car is the worst imaginable place to listen to music. Glass and plastic reflecting in every direction, engine and road noise competing with the song, and a listener who isn't in the center of anything, pinned against a door, with one speaker 4 inches from the left ear and another 6 feet from the right. But look at what a car has that a room doesn't. A living room is an unknown problem. A Cadillac Seville is identical to every other Cadillac Seville. Same dimensions, same materials, same seats, every time. Therefore, for the first time, Bose could measure the exact space his speaker would play in. He was no longer designing for a room. He was designing for that cabin. In 1979, he walked into General Motors with the idea. They signed in 1982. And in 1983, the first car in the world with a factory Bose system hit the road, the Cadillac Seville. That same year, it reached the Eldorado, the Buick Riviera, and the Oldsmobile Toronado. 4 4-inch speakers, each with its own 25-watt amplifier and its own equalization. $895 as an option, on a car that cost under $22,000. Everything else came out of that. 33 years later, Bose put 34 speakers inside a Cadillac CT6. But measuring the room only solves half the problem. The other half was still the size of the box. And in 1984, Bose shrank it with a tube. To get bass, you have to move air. To move air, you need a big cone in a big box. That was the law, and it's why good speakers were furniture. But there's another way to move air, and it's been sitting in plain sight for centuries: an organ pipe. Bose and his engineer William Short spent years on that idea. On September 29, 1982, they filed the patent. They called it an acoustic waveguide, and it works like this. The sound coming off the back of the cone, the sound normally wasted inside the cabinet, gets fed into a long tube folded back on itself. That tube behaves like a resonating column of air. A small speaker goes in, and bass that has no business being there comes out. In 1984, the first product arrived, the acoustic wave music system. Radio, cassette, and a waveguide in a single piece. And Bose made a strange decision. He didn't sell it in stores. He sold it by phone and by mail, direct, with a 30-day home trial. His reasoning, in his own words, he was certain high-end audio stores would see it as a threat. Nobody wants to show off a hi-fi system that fits on a table. 9 years later came the version that reached every kitchen in America. The Wave Radio, 1993, $349. Inside a box 14 inches wide, a 27-inch tube snakes back and forth. It sold hundreds of thousands a year. Bose had tamed the size of the room. But he'd been obsessed with another problem since 1978, and that one had nothing to do with size. It started on a plane, a Swissair flight, Zurich to Boston. Amar Bose puts on the headphones the airline hands out, and the roar of the engines doesn't just leak through. The headphones make it worse. He has 8 hours ahead of him. So he starts running calculations right there in his seat, on a strange idea. What if headphones, on top of producing sound, could listen to it? A microphone picks up the engine noise. The electronics generate the exact opposite wave. The two cancel before they reach your eardrum. On paper, silence. But doing that requires tiny microphones, a circuit that computes the inverse wave in real time, and a battery that fits on your head. In 1978, none of that existed. It took him more than 10 years and $50 million. And it's worth being precise here, because this gets told wrong. Bose did not invent active noise cancellation. The idea had been patented since the 60s and already tested in military aviation. What Bose did was turn it into something you could buy. First, in 1986, he handed 2 prototypes to Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager for the Voyager, the non-stop flight around the world. 9 days crammed into a tiny cockpit. In 1989, the product arrived. The first noise-canceling aviation headset, for pilots. And 11 years after that, in 2000, the technology came down from the cockpit to the passenger. Quiet comfort. 22 years between the flight and the product. Then came the chain. QC2 in 2003, QC3 in 2006, QC15 in 2009, QC25 in 2014, and in 2016 the QC35 finally cut the cable. QC35-2 in 2017, QC45 in 2021 with transparency mode, and the Quiet Comfort Ultra today. Bose had been selling music for 30 years. Therefore, it's striking that his most imitated product reproduced nothing at all. He was selling the absence of sound. In 2001, the iPod showed up. Suddenly, there were 1,000 songs in a pocket and nowhere decent to play them. Therefore, in September 2004, Bose launched the SoundDock, a cradle with a 30-pin connector where you docked your iPod and the room filled up. It stayed in the catalog until 2013. Apple killed it when the 2012 switch to Lightning made half the accessory market obsolete overnight. But by then, the cable was already unnecessary. July 2013, $199. The SoundLink Mini. £1.50 of aluminum the size of a thick matchbox. 2 tiny drivers, a passive radiator, and digital processing squeezing out bass that had no right to come from there. Look at what that is. It's the same question from 1968 and 1984. How do I get big sound out of a small volume? Solved one more time with a different piece of engineering. Behind it came the Mini 2. The color, the micro with its strap, the cylindrical 360-degree revolve, the flex, the max. The catalog keeps growing today with the SoundLink Plus. Amar Bose saw almost none of it. He died on July 12, 2013, the same month the SoundLink Mini reached stores. And 2 years before that, he had already given his company away. In April 2011, Amar Bose handed the majority of his company to MIT, 51% of it. And this is where you have to read the fine print, because it isn't a normal donation. The shares MIT received carry no voting rights. Therefore, the institute runs nothing. It appoints no board members. It doesn't decide what gets built or where. It owns the majority of Bose and controls absolutely none of it. It can't sell them either. Not to a fund, not to a competitor, not to anyone. The shares don't move. The only thing MIT receives is the dividend. Cash, every year, directed toward education and research. Think about what he just built. The kid who repaired radios because his father's business collapsed during the war. The doctoral student whose professor, Y.W. Lee, lent him his life savings to start. 47 years later, he hands the entire company back to the institution where it all began, and structures it so that nobody, ever, can break it up, buy it, or take it public. He didn't leave an inheritance. He left an armored machine for funding research. Amar Bose died 2 years later, on July 12, 2013, at 83. And his speakers are still paying MIT's bills every year. Bose spent 50 years trying to make your living room sound like a concert hall. But the records you play in it were made on speakers built for the exact opposite purpose. Not to flatter you, but to expose every mistake. Speakers designed to sound bad on purpose when the recording was bad. They're in nearly every studio where an album you know by heart was ever recorded. And almost nobody knows how they got there. That story is next. It's on screen.